This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter.
The Pepe Sayer all new Australian butter sheets. Everything we've learned over the last 12 years, we've put into making this new butter sheet. Combined with a brand spanking new shiny machine from Switzerland, we're able now to produce this beautiful butter sheet that's so easy to laminate with. So it's pliable, it's very fresh. If you're an Australian baker buying our butter sheets, they're made weekly. The formulation, it's a beautiful unsalted butter that will work for savoury and sweet. I think it's a perfect balance there. The bakers and pastry chefs that are using it are just raving about it.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
We're sort of constantly gauging, okay, what is this person in for? What do you need from me? Is it a sit by the table and have a chat to you about the menu? Or is it, smartening things up and giving a very sharp service? And that is kind of table to table. It's not even night to night.
Hey everyone, it's Dani Valent here for Dirty Linen. Another food chat with an interesting person in the world of eating and drinking. You're working in food media, we focus a lot on the new, the bright, the shiny, the just happening, the on trend. But I think my favourite restaurants are those that have settled in and got to know themselves. I think there's a really beautiful confidence that comes from a business that has had some time to settle in, to work out who its customers are, to really anchor its identity. And that is just the most relaxing and fun and expressive place to be as a diner. I absolutely love it. But the person we're chatting to today has sort of got a new restaurant, but it's sort of old as well. Kirbie Tate has been in the same site on Clarendon Street in South Melbourne for a decade. She has refashioned the space and the offering according to, well, we'll find out what according to. But I think it's really lovely to catch Kirby at a time in her career when she's finally put her name on the restaurant. It is called Kirby. I reviewed it recently for Good Weekend, Good Food, The Age, all those many mastheads. And it was really, really enjoyable to write about. A little bit Frenchy, very wine focused, open all day, and definitely there for the community. I'm really excited to have a chat to Kirby on the show. Welcome to Dirty Linen, Kirby.
Thank you, Dani.
Tell us what Kirby is to you.
So I set out to create something that was quite authentic to me and where I'm at in my career. So it's the most recent iteration out of 323 Clarendon Street, which, as you said, we've been in for quite some time now. And it's a neighbourhood bistro and bar that you'd cross town for, I guess, is how best to describe it. So broadly, it's just a connected space about people and place, and less about one particular focus on food or bev or wine, and more about sort of bringing all of those beautiful parts of hospitality together in equal parts.
If you reflect on when you took on part of the space, because you've expanded over time, if you reflect on the you that took on that space those years ago and think about who you are now, what kind of journey has that person been on?
Well, I guess, most of my career at that point had been in and around cafes. So when we first took the original space, which was Wynyard, it was really reflective of my experiences at that time to date. So it was a lot about community at that point. I had just had my second little one. So it was a very much focused about, on family and neighbourhood. And it was about bringing people together down that laneway to catch up and all be part of that beautiful community at the time. And so the offering was very much reflective of that. It was beautiful food, and it was really beautiful specialty coffee, but it was more about people and place.
And if you think about your progression and the space's progression over that decade, like talk us through the iterations and I suppose what it was that drove you and, the realizations you had along the way.
Yeah, I think for anyone who's creating, whether it's things or place or space, it's always in some way reflective of where they're at as a person and what their experiences have been. And so if I think about that journey from Wynyard into Wynyard and James, then into James and now Kirby, I can sort of see what was happening at the time, which was, a lot about where I was with family, a lot about what I had learnt from the industry, and what I was keen to learn. So I think, moving it into James was about being curious about where I could take a space that had always been seen as local. And, I had that curiosity at the time coming out of COVID. I think we were all looking for something new. And so it was about how, that space in particular was about exploring, where we could take it and what else we could be, and which other hats we could successfully put on. And so, James was an amazing experience in time, and then I guess I got to a point where it needed to be a little bit more authentically me and a bit more back to community, and somewhere that you just wanted to hang out.
So James was, you had a Korean chef on board, and it was a modern Korean menu. It was really great. Like, I thought it was really fun to eat there, and made me think about the wave of modern Korean dining that we've got in Australia at the moment, which I think is really fascinating. It's people who, came to Australia mostly to do other things and then sort of fell into food. They weren't trained in Korean food, but they start bringing their Korean heritage into it. I found it really, really interesting. It gave me a lot to think about. But when I reflect on writing about it, and I gave it a hat, I thought it was great. I spoke a lot to your chef at the time. I spoke to you as well, but it was a very chef-focused restaurant. You pushed your chef forward. It wasn't your name on the building. It wasn't his either, but it wasn't yours. And now
many people thought it was, but yeah.
Right. So, I'm just so interested in this, embracing of your own identity and, why it's happened at this time in your life. I think it's sort of it annoys me that when I'm speaking to a woman who's got children, we start talking about work-life balance. I don't know why men don't put those issues to the forefront of the conversation as much. But I guess we know, high patriarchy. But sorry about my little tangent. Tell me about it from your point of view.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a little layered in why I was at that time sort of pushing people forward, chefs and front of house, rather than sort of owning that myself. I've really always done the same. I've always played the same roles in all of the businesses that I've done. It's more just about now identifying with that and putting that out there. And I think mostly at the time, choosing to put Chef Kim forward was responding to what I thought people wanted and needed from that space. Once we started to sort of get curious about it and put it out there, we had this great response, certainly by the Korean community, to having a full Korean kitchen in there. And so for me, it was about, okay, well, let's respond to this and let's go with it. It wasn't necessarily intentional to start with, but for me, it's always about creating and leaving enough space to be responsive to what people are excited about, what they're curious about, and what they want to know about. And at the time, it was Korean dining, and it was also about, who is this fabulous young chef? And so for me, it was just about going along with that and saying, okay, well, this is brilliant. It works. I'm learning, and people are happy. So let's do this. And it was successful in that way.
So what are you perceiving that people want differently now?
Well, I think it's all sorts of things, but I think with the way people are dining now, whether it be fine dining, whether they're spending money at cafes, it's a local bar or restaurant, people just want to really enjoy where they are. And I think to do that successfully, you need to be authentic about what you're offering. And for me, Kirby's is a really authentic expression of where I'm at. And so it made most sense to say, okay, if I'm going to do something of quality and I want this to be sitting here in 20 years' time, then what is it that this space is? Who am I and what can I bring to it, and have that be sustainable? And so, it was less about fine dining for me, and it was more about sort of having a space that was fully connected. And I knew that I could do that well. I've always had a real focus on the balance of things, and so the offering that we've got now is representative to all of those things. And I think that's what people want. I don't think it's specific. I don't think there's any one thing that people are looking for. I think they want to feel connected and they want to feel good in the places they're spending money and time.
So what does it mean, this idea of connection to you? Like, is it about connecting with the people you're dining with? Is it connecting with the physicality of the space? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. I think it's equal parts people and space and offering. And I think if you can connect all of those things, you've got a really solid offering for people. And then if you connect those things, you can then connect with the person and they can connect with you fully. So, people being staff and community and customer, and space being music and lighting and design and placement, and offering being food, bev and service. And I think for me, no matter what I've done, it's always been really, really important to connect all of those things equally. I think if you can do that, you get a great response from people because they can feel that that's solid and that it's something that they can trust.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It feels so lovely in there. And I don't know, I feel like I'm not good at decor. Like I've been trying to buy a lamp for about 2 years. I've just got no idea. Every decision feels like it will be wrong. So I just don't make any decisions, but I feel like there's a real confidence and, I feel like it's careful and it's thoughtful and feels like there's so much behind it, but everything in there feels very easy, like the ladder that leans up against the wall, the way the blackboard is sort of, the way the blackboard sits on the wall. I don't know, the lighting's great, the different tones, like there's some bright and dark and it all just knits together. Is that something that, imagine you're talking to someone who's about to open their first cafe or they're a year in and it doesn't quite feel right. Are there things that you can, tell them to do, or is it just about feeling it from the inside?
I think it has to come from the inside. I guess that's what I'm saying, in that there are other spaces I walk into that have made completely different decisions to what I would, bright lights, no music, and I can love that space as well, as long as it feels connected to who they are and what they're trying to express. And so for me, all of that's coming together of lighting and that sort of ease and that sense of ease that you get comes from me creating a space that I want to be in and I want to hang out in. And so, and I think it's also about, and I think women do this really well, is about being sort of having a sensitivity to your environment, rather than having a very fixed concept when you're coming into these things. I think it's really important to leave enough space, and so that you can have that awareness and be open to sort of shifting and adapting things. It allows me to just constantly be responsive to what people are wanting from the space, whether it's, what kinds of people or what time of day or what time of year. I'm just constantly doing a tweak all day, through a day, a tweak of lighting, a tweak of music. It's like, and I'm really sensitive to those things. And I think that's what gives you that feeling in there. But I think that has to be coming from you. And I think you'll happily go along on any journey with anyone as long as it feels like it's, it's true. There's trust in it.
It's so interesting and so personal, and it makes me think about the hospitality industry more broadly and how it seems pretty hard to run an independent restaurant these days, and to have that personal touch, to create a space and to recreate it daily. What's your view on that? Obviously there's a lot of restaurant designers and they definitely have a place, but it can't be as expressive of the person, of the owner, when you've got a team sort of looking at it as architects. I guess there's going to be benefits to that, maybe, I don't know. I'm sure there's benefits to that. And some spaces are too big and need too much of a machine behind them for, one person to be finding the perfect, ladder on Marketplace. But yeah, what do you think about the state of the industry and this sort of push towards scale?
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think for me, I look at those two, things as totally different businesses. When you've got the, big money and big groups behind things, it's definitely got its place, and it's a successful way of coming at hospitality, and can be a very successful model. I think when you're running an independent, like I've always done, it is incredibly difficult to scale, and I think that was part of my decision to move it back to having a huge focus on neighbourhood and community, because I think you have to be pitching to the to your closer audience in order to have that sustainability and stay connected, because that's really your sell in an independent like Kirby. What you're selling is that feeling. Whereas these bigger restaurants and super cafes are not necessarily selling that to you. They're not, that's not the focus. And so I think for independents, it's important to be pitching to your communities and to your neighbourhoods. That's the way I think that you can have a successful independent. And then from there, you can look to scale what it is that, creates that feeling. But as an owner, I think you've got to stay really, really close to it.
Well, you can't be closer to it than putting your name in neon in the window. Like, how does it feel to have, made that leap?
Yeah, I mean, vulnerable. It felt very vulnerable at first, and it wasn't done lightly. Let me tell you, I live across the road from the restaurant, so I can't get away from that sign. But, with some toing and froing about what it should be called and how we sign it, and, it made sense in the end to put my name up there. And it wasn't about, you'll come in and you'll see me every day and I'll be tied to this place for the next 50 years. And, it was more about what is Kirby and what does Kirby represent, and it's so many things that are in line with my, my core values. And so I thought, this is the way that I have a lasting space, in that I connect all the dots. And one of the connections, unfortunately, was a big neon sign in the window with my name.
I think fortunately, I love it.
Oh God! But I've since met many Kirbys. I think I'd met one in my lifetime until I put that sign up, and I've since had many, many photos with other Kirbys, so it's quite funny.
That's so great. I don't think I've met any other Kirbys, but I guess I need to just loiter at the restaurant a bit longer.
Yeah. No, it's been. At first, I felt very vulnerable in putting that up. But it actually passed quite quickly, and I have a confidence about it now in a way that I didn't think I'd get to quite as quickly. And that it helps to take ownership of it when you've got your name up in lights. So I've always overseen menus and overseen wine lists, but it seems a lot easier to communicate that to my audience, that that's me and it's my vision when my name's up in lights. So,
Do you think as a woman that journey is harder? It is harder to put yourself forward in that way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know plenty of women who, would absolutely love to, put their name up in a neon sign, in neon lights. I think it is common for women to sort of want to shy away from that. I think men do it more naturally. I think women get there, but I think it takes them longer. I certainly wouldn't have had the confidence to do that, 10 years ago. So I think you do go on a journey and you're on a path, and you do get to a place where you're more comfortable in your own skin, and that allows you to make those more confident decisions. For me, it just took a little bit of time.
Kirby, let's go back to the start of the hospitality journey. Tell us when you first started working in restaurants and cafes.
So I think my first job was about 13 or 14 at a little Greek cafe in Wollongong in New South Wales, and I was doing that sort of out of school hours, and then that sort of just followed on to cafes and then weddings and function centres and restaurants, and it was always a bit of a survival job, like it is for most hospitality people, and it was always something that I was doing while I found what else it was that switched me on and kept me interested. And I think, and this is such a common story, but hospitality just gets into you, and once you've been doing it for so long, it just the ability to connect with people and be introduced to people constantly and be a part of something that's so live and ever changing is addictive. And I think that's why we're all doing such, a hard slog and why we're prepared to, face the challenges and deal with the challenges that we are, is that, it's in us. Hospitality people are nuts. Yeah, but we're all addicted to that people part of hospitality. That's what it's all about.
Do you think you were that sort of person already, or that it was that hospitality awoke something in you or created something in you just with that contact?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm actually a really sort of quiet person. I'm not in any way extroverted, and so hospitality, I think, always allows me to have this connection with people without being extroverted about it. It sort of gives you a role in which to be, leading and social and connecting and it's almost like its own persona. Hospitality kind of creates this person or this personality for you, whether it's you or not, that allows you to sort of, socialize in that way and look after people in that way. So I think it's a bit of both. I think I am someone who's pretty hyper aware of my environment, and I'm I love people and I love conversation and I love being a part of interesting things. But I think hospitality has definitely taught me the skills to do that.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I love that description. It's the way you describe it there. It sounds very sustaining for you, but is it also draining?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's why I say we're all mad, because there's not a lot in it, especially when you're doing an independent space like mine, and there's so much that it requires. It's such a generous thing, hospitality and giving hospitality, that it is taxing, and energetically you're giving constantly. But then you're also getting this beautiful reward. And I think the other decision in making it, turning it back to a neighbourhood space, is that in those spaces, like in cafes, which is where I started, you get this really beautiful loop back to you. So you're giving, but you also get these, incredible interactions with people, because in those environments, people are so familiar with you. And it's just the most beautiful thing. Whereas when we went into more of that fine, sort of semi-fine dining space, you lose a lot of that looping back. Especially if you're somebody who operates front of house, and so for me there was a real loss in that. And then bringing it back to Kirby, I've kind of, I'd forgotten how much return there is in neighbourhood and local spaces. It's a really beautiful thing. And I think that's why we all do it.
Yeah, that's such an interesting analysis of that dynamic and how different it is. Like, I suppose so many of the customers you would have had at James, they come there once, and you have to begin the sort of you have to showcase the place to them anew and afresh over and over again.
Yeah, and it is a side of hospitality for sure. It's not the side that I most enjoy. I think a lot of people love fine dining, and they love it for those reasons, that they're there to give an experience, put on a show. For me, that's not what hospitality is about. For me, that's not what I love, and it's not what I receive from it. And I think that's because, partly that's my personality, but I also think, having spent so much time in cafes, where that is, it's so abundant, that sense of familiarity with people. So I guess I was very much ready after running James for 4.5 years to kind of start to get that back. And neighbourhood spaces do that. I love that you can walk into Kirby's and tables know tables, and people know my kids and I know them and I know their story. And, so it's got a real cafe approach to a restaurant, which is what I love.
Yeah, it's very, those interactions and that sense of being able to come back to somewhere and be known. It's very profound, and I think so life affirming and really important. What sort of, how do you see your customers using the space?
God, all sorts of ways. I think you nailed it in the way you wrote about it. And that was intentional, in that I wanted the space to be all sorts of things to all sorts of people. And so locals are using the space in lots of different ways. And as you said, people are there on laptops, which is how I've always gotten to know the community, because I've seen so many people do so many great things sitting on our tables on a laptop day in and day out. So
love that.
And so they're back to doing that. They're catching up for a drink with friends. They're bringing family in early for dinner. They're bringing their friends across town because it's a place they can be proud of in the area, which I think is really exciting. So, it's kind of, sometimes we've got people down in the laneway sitting down on the concrete with wine out of a latte glass, and then other times we're decanting beautiful bottles bought in BYO and really stepping it up and creating a special experience. And I think what we do well is, going back to that sort of being responsive rather than have a fixed concept that we're trying to deliver people. We're sort of constantly gauging, okay, what is this person in for? What do you need from me? Is it a sit by the table and have a chat to you about the menu? Or is it, smartening things up and giving a very sharp service? And that is kind of table to table. It's not even night to night. And I think it's really unique to find those spaces. And, there are so many places to eat and spend money, but very few that do that are sort of responding to who you are rather than telling you who they are.
Oh, that's so good. I love it. Kirby, I feel like, we haven't talked about the food at all. And I know this is very much an experience-driven venue, but the food is delicious. I love the menu. Tell us a little bit about the offering.
Yeah. So, the food has to be good. And I think a lot of the time when you get these beautiful neighbourhood spaces that feel good and everyone's familiar, and, then what drops is the quality of food or the wine list, So I didn't want to compromise that either. Food is really important to me. I learnt a lot about comfort food through cafes, but then I also learnt a lot, in stepping things up and smartening things up with the way that we serve James. So it's a bit of a coming together of both of those things in terms of its approach. And then for me, I didn't set out necessarily for it to be Euro, but Euro is something I think that comes across lunch and dinner really successfully. I think people can come at a more Euro-style food in a way that says, I'm happy to have that 3 times a week. It allows us to put a soup on, it allows us to do a pasta, it allows us to do a sandwich. You've got that flexibility with Euro. And so sometimes the menu is a lot more Greek leaning, sometimes it feels very French or Italian, and that menu is ever changing. So for me, it's not necessarily about a cuisine, it's about good comfort food, or, part of those sort of key words I put down when I was envisioning what this was about well home cooked. So it should be food that you want to share, that you're not intimidated by, that you understand, but that you absolutely love as well. So it's the quality is there, but they're things that are familiar to you. And I think that kind of goes into that sort of connecting the dots thing about what the restaurant is that if we were putting anything out on the table, but we had this very sort of familiar approach elsewhere, there would be a disconnect. So that's how that menu comes about. And as I said, it changes all the time.
Well, tell me about creamed silverbeet.
Creamed silverbeet is so good. I mean, it's kind of like something that you find that your nonna's giving you that you're just obsessed with. I mean, it's pretty simple, but it's just got all of those elements balanced so beautifully. It's, as you said, it's rich, it's creamy, it's green, it's healthy. It's, it's just a good example of comfort food. And the other way I love to eat is just a whole bunch of full flavoured things that work great with, work really well with good bread. So for me, it's about good bread, good oil, and good produce. And I think there you've got a really beautiful offering.
Yeah, I think it comes together so well. Nothing is jarring. Everything knits together. All the different elements bounce off one another, and it's definitely greater than the sum of its parts, which I think is a sign of excellent hospitality. I'm really excited that you've done this transition, Kirby. I loved James as well, but I think there's something so satisfying about the next step in this journey for this space, and and what you've done, your personal journey, and how it's all sort of it's just there, front, center, beautiful. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Well, we want you to love it. We want you to love it. So it's exciting to look back at a room full of locals again. I will say that.
Yeah. Kirby, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I think it's a really, I feel like a lot of people will learn from what you've said, and maybe it'll give people confidence to not be looking around them at what other people are doing, but to feel confident in finding their own voice and putting their own stamp on a venue. And that could be, if they're an owner, that could be in, the whole concept. But I think even if you're just touching a table, offering that experience, I think it is so lovely when people bring themselves to it.
Yeah, I think you can feel it. I think it feels very obvious when you're in a space that's connected to who the person is, and they're the places that are not necessarily, they're not written about. They're not going for awards. They're not, as you said, new and shiny. But they've got this strength and confidence about them. I think you worded that really well, and I think through that, they then become sustainable. And I think we all need to be looking at what is sustainable in terms of our little offerings. And so I think if you can do that, if you can connect all of the dots, I think you've got a really good shot.
Yeah, love it. Can't end better than that. Thanks, Kirby, for sharing with us today. Looking forward to my next visit, and something delicious in the glass and on the plate, and just good feelings all around. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dani.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This